this one because this may have some importance, I don't know. Right. Let's read that statement there. By the end of this decade, we will live under the first one world government that has ever existed in the Society of Nations. A government with absolute authority to decide the basic issues of survival. Okay? One world government is inevitable. And that was a quote by Pope John Paul II, yeah?
No, Francis.
Is it Pope Francis? I thought it was Pope John Paul II who predecessor. Go back a bit then.
A new world orders, a new temper on adoring Catholics after stumbling from giving a hug to a disabled person in a wheelchair. The Pope is losing his temper on his followers for a reason, because Pope Francis knows a new world order is right around
Pause. Pope John Paul
and he doesn't
II,
need
right.
his followers
Okay,
anymore.
so let's say that. By the end of this decade, we will live under the first one world government that has ever existed in the Society of Nations, a government with absolute authority to decide the basic issues of survival, right? One world government is inevitable, Pope John Paul II. And you said...
Yeah.
Well, you tell me what you said. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think that the world will be unified under God.
Okay.
And God's government. And, of course, God has the absolute authority to decide the basic issues of survival. What else but God?
Yeah, but say it the way you said it before, because you said, and what's wrong with that? Because I know where you're coming from. Don't...
Right, in terms of the New World Order, which has been associated with people like George Bush Sr., obviously that would be the most horrible, tyrannical, dehumanised version of the future. But all of the powers that be are currently condoned by God for our betterment, so we have something to struggle against in terms of our own human nature, in terms of discovering that our yearning for something that is good and true. All of these conditions which are in place at the moment should be enough to stir that in us. It should be enough to stir us to that yearning which leads us back to God. A true understanding, given how ridiculous institutional religions are, how ridiculous institutional politics is, how insidious the economy is, war, industry, it's all so unnecessarily cruel and dehuman. All of those things, all of the brutality of man to man on a big scale, on a little scale, in the family or whatever, all of that heartbreak that we see every day should be enough to cause us to want to find some sort of goodness, some sort of truth. Some people try and look for it in religions because they want to seek God, but you go to a religion, you're getting people's agenda.
So you're saying unifying is not necessarily such a bad thing?
I'm saying the kingdom of God is the world unified with a common understanding of God, with institutions put in place, maybe in terms of human governance or whatever, but there will be a recognition that it is a one world thing that we're dealing with. It's no longer this country or that country. It may be that time zone or that time zone, because I understand that in terms of 12 tribes stuff.
Or even simpler than that, just where the sun is in the sky, according to where your relative position on Earth is. Yeah, you can only do certain things during the daylight hours and vice versa. So
no, but people share in certain places of the world, and it's right to illustrate this before in different ways. Did one yesterday actually, about the kingdom. It's going to be, because the Bible talks about the people of Israel and all of those. Messiah comes with a call to remembrance to the people of Israel. He didn't speak to Gentiles, except they be understood as part of that family of Israel. Because Israel, let's remember, it is a mixed conglomeration of peoples who stand under the banner of Israel. I'm not talking Israel, those fools who are mashing up the place.
Or is Ra-El, as in El, the name of
God. The terebinth, elk, that relates to me. Sorry.
Well, here's the thing, right? I have to say, because I mean the way you said it is, and what's wrong with a one world government? That's the way you basically
under God
state
and God's true understanding and hope and love.
and God ruling with absolute authority.
Yeah,
now
that
here's
sort of thing.
yeah, obviously people can't see that, but you know, a globe divided into its relative time zones, you know. Yeah. Well, you got longitude and latitude, and people live in a place
But all of
under
those
the
people,
sun. Those are just conventions that we've made up. We live on a ball, so to speak.
yeah, and God makes fruit. It's demonstrable in terms of message.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? One world government. I mean, you're saying that's a good thing. I mean, and I'm gonna play the other side now. What some call the devil's advocate, but it isn't always being the devil by asking these questions. What's right with that? I mean, here we have
that a group of people living on the world no longer see them in terms of the other.
Mm.
The way I understand it, under the kingdom, from north to south will be your brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
There will be you in the mirror. To the east and west, there will be your brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Another you in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing is God can make it possible that it's an actual worthwhile thing to have one.
But what you're actually talking about
understanding.
really is
Kingdom
Old
of
Testament
God.
stuff.
I'm
You're talking about rules and
I'm talking about New Testament stuff.
Under grace.
I'm talking about the common things that we want that we can understand and work together with.
Right, there's under grace,
What
and then
happens
there's
in
rules and
world-
regulations for how much a kilogram is, and getting your weights and measures right, and things like trade, and things like just agriculture, just getting food around the world, getting people fed.
God,
Quantifying.
I'm talking about God, yeah.
I know you're talking about God,
abundance.
and we're talking about a government, and you're saying, well, what about Christ's righteous government? Yeah? Basically. As opposed to a government made up of a monopoly of wealthy men,
in terms
a
of
syndicate,
a secular one world government.
a syndicate,
Horrible nightmare, mate.
a syndicate,
But
a corporate.
You can't have a holy one world government in any other hands than the true God, and that's a disputed term. It has to be the true God which will come and show His power.
Look at how we are, first of all. The relative position we find ourselves in. If you was to give someone a job, let's say you was asking them to put a wall up or build a house, qualification has something to do with it, doesn't it? Knowledge has something to do with it, doesn't it? You know, being able to do that trade well, having a good working practice, a safe working practice, things like that. We've come to value that, haven't we? And that's one of the jobs, it would seem, of having a positive group of people working for your benefit, and people will call that government, okay?
No.
Controlling the mind, governing the mind, right? Governing the idea.
Steering the ship.
Steering the ship. So is that a bad thing? Is steering the ship and having a wheel and a captain a good thing, as opposed to a rudderless ship where, well, the ship will just somehow find itself where it's meant to be? What would you say is the best out of those two scenarios?
The ship steered and directed by committee.
Well, ultimately there's going to be one steering wheel, isn't there? You know, you can't have 10 steering wheels and 10 different agendas.
Everyone's pulling in their own different direction.
It wouldn't work, would it? wouldn't work. No direction would be achievable. And we're talking about vision, aren't we? We're talking about having goals and ambition and moving. I mean, many people are quite happy to just live life with no goals, no ambition, just to do what they do. Don't trouble me, don't bother me, that's fine. But do you expect, in that set of circumstances, progress to be achieved? If you can even define what progress is. I mean, in my experience, narrow as it may be, I've realised that putting in the energy, putting in the time, putting in the work, achieves great things. Now, you can work for somebody else, and you might only get a small percentage of that return actually coming back to you. You can work for yourself and get 100% back, but there's also 100% of the risk. And this is why many people don't choose to work for themselves, because unless you can guarantee to make money at all times, you know, you'll have some good times and you'll have some lean times, and not everyone can deal with that. A good example of that is actors, or even musicians, or people that work, you know, in that creative industry. They may find themselves going through long periods of time where they're not actually earning any money, but because it is their passion, something that they enjoy doing, they don't mind. Others of them maybe turn their hand to other areas. It's not always about being in the film, but maybe they do drama classes, you know, and teach people how to be in the industry. And then there's also voiceovers and all these other areas that if you're a creative person and you think about what's good for your craft, you'll find something to do with your skill set. And everybody's got a skill set. So, you know, I'm wondering, in the world, does everybody use their skill set the right way?
What's that got to do with the one world government?
I don't know. I mean, do you govern yourself? Do you rule yourself? Do you take care of yourself and things that need taken care of? Or does someone have to tell you what to do? Does mum and dad have to tell you to, you know, tidy up your bed when you get out of your bed? Or do you tidy your bed? Do you see the value in that? Is there a value in it? Because I think a lot of people are stuck on the most basic, simple questions these days. Is there a value when I get up? You know, I'm only going to get in the bed again and mess it up again. Yes, that's true. But cleanliness is next to godliness. The presentation of things.
But
why?
Where is that in the Bible?
Why is cleanliness next to godliness?
Why indeed?
If you want to know.
Doesn't Messiah come and say, look, you wash your hands for outward show?
Uh-huh.
Why don't your disciples wash before they eat? Cleanliness next to godliness? No, I don't think so. Godliness is from within. You might be soiled with the world on the outside, but it's not what goes in the mouth that defiles it, it's what comes out.
But why? Let's get to the root of what that metaphor really symbolises. You're talking about the state of character, state of the soul, yeah? If such a thing is measurable, right? The honourability of somebody. What is right action, what is wrong action? What is wisdom? You know, how is wisdom applicable in anything? Because if you got things like, oh well, there is no God, therefore there is no measurement that I can see, that, you know, we've lived through history and no other human being has figured out what the measure of righteousness or good behaviour or good character is, and the value of it over short term and long term. So let's just throw caution to the wind, you know, as in this modern age, in this modern thinking, you've got things like evolution where people can therefore suggest that they invent their own morality. As long as it feels good to me, I'll just do that. And there's no consequences, because they are people that have, as Mark Passio says, a solipsistic mind. Me, myself and I, that's all that's important. Now I related that to that selfishness. You've also in the past related that to, well, actually having self-preservation, calling that selfishness, is a good thing.
No, hang on. Did I say that?
Yeah, you said that.
No, so I might have said something which you understood like that. Selfishness with a big capital S, an understanding of who and what we are, is a good thing. Selfishness with a little small s might be useful to the organism. And in terms of society, selfishness in terms of what I understand as most family people involves their own particular unit as themselves written large, but it's still them before anyone else. Do I think that's a good thing? Well, I think that sort of thing is maybe too narrow a definition of the self.
Right,
It's not
stop,
the big
put
capital
a
S.
pin in that for a minute while I explain this. You see, what is the measure of a human being in their finite capability? Right, what can they do with their time, their skill set, their 2 arms and 2 legs if they've got them? You know, whatever it is that they've got, what can they do more than what they can do in 24-hour period of time? As we say, I'm only human.
Yeah, but what's the most
Right,
important thing for a person to do? What should a person spend his time doing?
What? Yeah, but you know, in that, you're seek ye first the kingdom of God.
Right, exactly. And I'm
Yeah, and all
I'm
things
sat
shall
here
be added.
explaining kingdom of God
Right?
stuff.
Whoa.
Seek
Kingdom
it.
of God literally translates like a template that you could overlay onto the physical world. We're talking about a spiritual character set that people have, that when they have that, a set of circumstances are activated in the physical by actions, direct states of being. It is that way, therefore the world will become the heaven that people are talking about. Currently we have both states coexisting, a state of hell in some places, a state of relative paradise in other places, yet neither is appreciated for what it truly is or has been in the past because of the lack of connectivity, the lack of seeing people from the other side, the objectivity. This is what I'm talking about. You know, when you're talking about solipsism, selfish, me, myself and I, versus the ability to actually translate how I feel to somebody else and saying, well, actually, the subjectivity that I feel, the love with a capital L, like you say, the selfish with a capital S, also translates to the selfish with the small s and the love with the small l. But looking at that in 2 ways, you've got agape love, love of all things, love and preservation of everything that the universe provides, yeah, in a, shall we say, non-sexual way. Although I do believe for it to be truly agape, it must encompass that also, but with a balance. Yeah? Then you've got the other side, which is the selfish, small capital S love. This is me, myself, personal. I will do that at the detriment of maybe something else that is of greater importance. An example of that is, I believe, when the negative side of love, that is the jealousies and the envies that can be generated through certain behaviours and character once again. And so it's important to recognise one's behaviour and character as being paramount to the situation and to get in the correct remedy to fix your life, to create that state of heaven on earth.
So again, that's one of the more important uses of self. This is the selfishness I would condone. Work on yourself. Recognise the problem, at least in part, stems from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Your own lack of understanding, your own lack of patience, your own lack of this, that, or the other. But sometimes it's superfluity of stuff as well. Too much action, not enough thought. But
do you believe the decadence of things contributes to a state of apathy? A state of apathy in terms of personal responsibility to put back in. For example, living in a natural state, living in the tribal state, in the original man state, the work you put in, the labour you put in is what you get out. If you go hunting, you do it in such a way that is responsible. You would have, I suppose, an affinity, a respect, a symbiosis with nature, recognising that the signs that you see, it's give and take. What you take must also be replenishable. Now we've reached a state on the earth where nobody knows what that true state is, but everybody knows that they're being lied to continually. People start to believe in the lie. People start to, well, and I'll tell you why they believe in the lie, because they haven't really got much choice, have they? the way they live their lives is very much directed and controlled already in a one world government type of way. So let's go back to that statement again, so we can remind ourselves of what that they are actually saying and see how far we actually are off from it. Because I think, you know, this tiptoe totalitarian technique of incrementally changing things, slowly changing the wording, slowly adjusting people's thinking, basically brainwashing and training them the way babies have trained to speak and all the rest of it, it's going on. Now, is there a danger? Well, many people feel that there is a danger, because it's already been shown that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
So
Imagine having...
So God must be the most corrupt.
Well, according to our measure of things, according to how we live, if God had the same needs, food, clothes and shelter, that we have, or, you know, then, well, let's look at it. Somebody has all the stuff in the world, let's just say. They get the say. For some reason, everybody just trusts them, and they have this say over what happens where. That's a very powerful position, and with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah? I think most people will agree with that. So, we have one person with all this responsibility. Is that a good thing? And what is that an attempt to replicate, and why do we do it that way? Is that the right way? Can a committee, like you say, steer a ship?
Yeah, but that one person who has all the authority, all of the say, all of the power, that I understand is going to be the rightful ruler, is the Messiah spirit, understandable as the capital letter I am, which is in every man. So in a kingdom of God where everyone is striving to have more and more of that spirit, that understanding, where even if you yourself are working in partnership with this indwelling spirit to make yourself better and better on a true and authentic,
I think the man who would be king kind of springs to mind.
So every man will be that I am, will have that indwelling spirit. That's kingdom of God stuff. Righteousness will, like water covers the seas. There'll be, every man will be striving to have more and more indwelling spirit, because God is the truth, and He will reveal His truth.
So it's not so much a case of every man for himself.
It's every man
for his brother
is the same man,
and his sister.
because
for his
the
brother and
indwelling
his sister,
spirit
though.
is capital letter I am. And to have one body with the indwelling spirit doing a job is much the same as having the other body with the same indwelling spirit doing it, whichever. It's still the same spirit, different form, same character, because kingdom of God is a character thing.
Well,
it's an understanding
let's
thing.
just go back to that statement now and apply that to this kingdom of God.
Secular, like they're talking about.
Well, I'm just saying, there's many people out there don't recognise the difference between. They don't see any difference, in fact, some people, between a gubernare, a government made up of men, and a religious body made up also of men. What's the weak link? It's always ourselves. Why? Because we have vulnerabilities. We're finite. In our finiteness, we recognise that our limitation is there. Not having the capability to make that decision. Every single one of us, I think, tries to live a life where we gain more and more control over our surroundings. Whether it actually is true control is debatable, but that seems to be the purpose. Seems to be what most people are trying to do. Even if they're just putting a new fridge in the thing, they're trying to get control over that aspect of their life so they can move on to something else. They can forget about that problem, let's say. That problem has been solved. However, like I say, the decadence of the West is that many other problems then get concealed and masked by certain behaviours, by ignoring the basic fundamental truth. You know, that we have to be here for one another. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you can say, well, I've lived up to all these rules and laws and I'm perfect? No man could ever say that. You go back before you knew these knowledges and things, you've probably broken all of that. You look at the Ten Commandments, they're just basic. They're just basic. I mean, is the Ten Commandments then the rules that we must live by? Absolutely. And do we all agree on that? I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, by the way. But I think in evaluating where we are, where we've come from, because these are old things, aren't they? This is not knowledge from the future, but it certainly pertains to our future. You know? Living the correct way, recognising quickly what wisdom is. It's a set of knowledge that applies to the finite human living condition that we find ourselves in, our basic needs, food, clothes and shelter. It applies directly to our needs. That's what our form of wisdom is. Worm wisdom will apply to a worm. An ant wisdom will apply to an ant. And it'll be for itself. And that's where I think you're talking about this selfish, find the kingdom. Find what it is that you want, that you need, to be sustained by the sun, to become the Uberman, the Uberwoman, the Superman, as it were, not necessarily to be above, because I think we've redefined our idea of what it is that we would like to see. More people would identify with the Superman of modern era than the Uberman of Nietzsche, even though Nietzsche was describing an actual condition that actually happens when men have great power.
What type of power?
Uberman power, above men power. For example, money. Having lots of money translates to above man power.
Because I wonder if you've actually read any of Nietzsche to understand this concept of the Superman.
Back on this again.
Yeah, but I do. It's like, what do you understand as Nietzsche's concept of the Superman?
I understand enough to be able to discuss that, what I've just discussed. Whether you see that or not, in his works, I'm talking about what I see in his
Someone
works.
who can go beyond the concepts of good and evil.
No, you're going somewhere else there, I think. I'm talking about the noble Superman that has been tried and tested, marketed. The people have had that Superman marketed to them. That's the Superman they want to see. That's the Jesus they want to see.
That's a pretty good Superman, though, isn't it? It's like
versus the cold, heartless, above man that was described very much in Nietzsche's.
Right.
You understand?
Get you.
Right. We have adapted. We've upgraded. Even Superman today, he doesn't have his shorts anymore. We've upgraded the idea, and we'll continue to kind of upgrade the idea.
So we've made it a Superman that we're comfortable with.
Yeah. And then it's very interesting that you've got the Justice League film coming out, and that you've got these two characters that both symbolise a type of hero, but one is more on, this is what a man can do, and he has to kind of break the rules. If he's going to win, he has to be somebody who's prepared to do certain things, to compromise that noble character. Where Superman, the way we have got the one that we've got now that we like to see, will not compromise. Doesn't have to compromise. Never has that moral dilemma in a way, because he's so far and above everybody. He's always got a solution in his back pocket, as if such a man does exist. Now maybe such a man with the wealth on earth does exist and can muster the greatest of human resources.
He also represents the nobility that Nietzsche would talk about, the nobility of superfluity. You're giving out of your excess from your abundance, very much so, in terms of Last Son of Krypton sort of stuff. It's like, abundance of power, very noble in his generosity.
But again, the Superman, as the comic book describes it, the metaphor in that particular model of him is that he came from a planet or from a world of heartless people, compared to what we recognise as a human being. A Kryptonian is a very cold, clinical, scientific person who doesn't have much time for love and emotions more than the practical, logistical side of things. And that's what they're more concerned with. So Superman being sent to Earth would not be the Superman he is had he not, one, come to Earth, but also a particular part of the Earth, away from the cities, yeah, away from the modern cave, and into the rural, into the plains, as it were, where the horizon is open and vast, and the imagination, I suppose, but also the lack of corruption that the city brings. Now, why is it that cities tend to bring corruption? Is it that people don't see the immediacy of their answers right in front of them? I.e., I live on a farm, I grow my own food, therefore I'm not robbing, stealing, killing or lying to get ahead of the game. The lack of access to the temptation is there. Although these days, with the internet, it's very much an intrusive thing. I was reading something on Banksy, a quote that he's put about the corporations and how the mainstream media basically force their messages into your domain, into your space. You know, gets their ideas into your head. They haven't asked for permission. It's just there, larger than life. Okay, yet many corporations feel that you do not have the right to question what they're promoting. However, having put it there in our domain, yes, it is questionable. You know, these Ubermen ideas, these, you know, people that are trying to steer the ship. Well, in a sense, it's better them than anyone else right now. Well, I was going to get to that point, because you look at, going back to what I was saying before, if people remember, people who are qualified, people who are time served, who've got the skills, who have proven that they can do a good job. You know, you've got a task that needs to be done. You've got conventional wisdom. What is conventional wisdom, anyway? I think, you know, Kevin hit upon that the other day. Conventional wisdom is emotional intelligence. It's what we call common sense. Why is it common sense? Because it's a type of wisdom that applies to the human condition, that involves love as its core reason for doing anything. Care is a core reason for doing anything. Care about environment, human condition. All factors relate back to the human condition, the human need. If you don't care, you're going to pollute the very air that you breathe in. You won't be able to breathe anymore. That's what we're talking about. That's conventional wisdom. That's emotional intelligence. That's common sense. Right? And out of that, you could derive a system of rules like the Ten Commandments. Not to say that man created this or whether it is a divine inspiration. Who knows? The thing is, we got it, and we do know that men had to write it. It didn't come from a dog. Okay? It was written in a language that we understand. Is that conventional wisdom? Is that emotional intelligence we're talking about? Love thy neighbour as thyself. I'd say yeah. And therefore, the ability to take the subjective feelings you have, this seek ye first the kingdom of God, of course, that's correct. Get yourself right with God. Know what morality is. Know what conventional wisdom is. Know what emotional intelligence is. Common sense. Have an education. Have some experience in life. Right? It's also going to mean that you've probably made some mistakes. That's why if we're judged by the law, we've all failed. But in order for our finite existence to know the difference, someone at some stage must have made that mistake. It's an inevitability. So, making a mistake, I don't think is necessarily the greatest sin. It's repeating the mistake, and we're still fully having knowledge of that and the harm it causes, continuing with that. There is, I believe, a deep-seated need, a type of psychosis, a type of woe is me, I'm feeling bad, so let me put my bad feelings into the world. Let me have my revenge on this what we call life, this parody of life. It's not going my way, so let me get some vengeance, let me throw a tantrum. And that's part and parcel of the human condition, isn't it? You know, the frustrations people feel, they don't feel they are able to express them, they don't feel that they're able to get a remedy. Some of them don't even recognise what the remedy could be, how to get there. You know, where they are is so far away from where they want to be, and they feel like they're trapped in a labyrinth of misunderstanding and fear and all the rest of it. And you throw things like the Bible or anything like that in its entirety, it's a scary prospect, especially for those who've never read it. And here comes somebody who's got the full understanding or the overstanding of it, and it's like, whoa, you've just presented a brand new world and told me that I must go and live there.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
so
now
it's inevitable.
It may be inevitable, but there has to be baby steps. In the same way that the totalitarian tiptoe has baby stepped us into this. Wait a minute, how's this come
Like
about, this new world
in
order?
the night, mate. No baby steps. Like in the blink of an eye. No baby steps. Look, it's upon you. Done. What?
Well, many people look at
It just
those
takes
passages with
a
dread and feel
a change
that.
of mind.
Yeah.
Before
Many people look at the Bible with a feeling of dread and fear the worst is to come. The more I'm seeing, I don't fear. I am actually looking at we could end up just getting there in a blessed way with emotional intelligence. You know, through overstanding, through recognising the causality of things and the factors that go into creating the circumstances you currently find yourself in. The diagnosis being correct, the examination of the symptoms that affect our condition, and applying the right remedy. And the remedy, I believe, most of all that's needed is character. Recognising what things do to people. Recognising the car wrecks in terms of emotions.
True.
Because you can't have emotional intelligence if your emotions are twisted. If your emotions always come to the wrong sum.
Ourselves, don't we?
We have to correct ourselves.
First on the the small o ourselves.
Yeah. So to say someone's going to rule over us, well, there's a lot of factors that go into that.
No,
And
I would say something's
for one,
going
don't
to rule
think that the
inside.
rule.
I'm saying something's going to rule inside of us, not over us, inside.
Okay, yeah, I get that point, but let's just look at
the
what
secular
is
stuff
presented, how it's been presented so far through the mainstream advertising. It's like a slogan. It's like buy this, buy into this.
Yeah.
This is the idea. Make us rich. We're the one with the idea.
About this.
Think about
this way.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's
Yeah.
always think about things this way. That's something I've kind of avoided.
Eat, sleep, consume, get married, reproduce, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as long as you feel you can do that, you're living in a free society, they say. As long as you can do that, don't ask questions of how things got to be and what's really going on and how come it's always turned out like this.
You're free to chase the goals that they set for you.
Mm.
And if you don't look up, then those are the goals which...
Yeah, you're free to worship a football team of your choice with the confines of a sport. And find your social niche and find lots of other people who worship with you and attend that church. And that could be the one world sustenance. A lot of people will be quite happy with that. What I'm talking about is that even religious ideas fall into that category, I think, lack the full overstanding of the emotional intelligence that is required, that will truly give us the freedom we need. One being, like you said, having personal responsibility, recognising your place in the system of governance. Because, truth be told, the one world leader should be you, should be me, should be everybody. And when they step forward and present that idea to the world, to the global platform, that is the best idea, that's what we should do. You know? And we should have some way of being able to wholeheartedly agree on things as being the best way to move forward. Now, how can we wholeheartedly agree? We must have something in common. And I'm not talking about those people that call themselves common purpose, because it seems that their agenda seems to have a dark negative side to it that only benefits a few. For it to be a truly global thing that we can all believe in and get behind, it has to be something that 99.99% of the people can get value out of and have an understanding or an overstanding.
We've got to learn how to deal with each other in terms of trust, in terms of truth, loyalty, common purpose, in a sense. But that love thing of family, if we can write it on a big scale, that's how humanity will survive.
Taking
By recognising
ownership of
each other
things
as-
like words like common purpose, again, that's an agenda. It's an advertising slogan. Buy into this. We're the only ones who are allowed to use that word. And if anybody uses
understand
it,
things this way.
if anybody uses it, all of a sudden you're branded with the negativity of, and you know, it's like they must be a paedophile because they think this. They've used that word. You see how the brainwash works? It's like they'll take something that was beautiful and destroy its meaning and its purpose, so it can no longer be used in emotional intelligence because it raises all sorts of
Negative
connotations. We need to take back our language, reappropriate what it is, what it means. You know, like the word gay, it used to mean to be happy. And then somebody's taken that word, haven't they? And they've turned it into something that people have mixed emotions about now. I don't think your mates would look at you. Well, they'd probably look at you quite strange if you said, how are you feeling today? I'm feeling gay. I'm feeling gay today. Come on, man. I mean, it's not something people would say, but 60 years ago, people would say it.
We've hit on something today.
I don't
it's
like
the think about the things.
Go back to the statement. Bring the statement up because there's just the way it was phrased is very sinister. By the end of this decade, and Pope John Paul was talking about from the 80s. Talk about by the end of the 90s, we will live under the first one world government that has ever existed in the Society of Nations. Now, again, that was reconfirmed with George Bush Sr. He says we now can see, there are real prospect of a new world order on the horizon. Now, they're always talking about it's on the horizon. Not on the horizon at all, because based on what they're saying, they've already got this first one world government that has ever existed in the Society of Nations. We're even having a so-called referendum on the formation of one of the major parts of this, the European Union. Because once they unify Europe, it's much easier to unify the world when you've got these large blocks of world that has already been unified from its fragmented state. So a government with absolute authority, just check that wording, right? And what they think authority means anyway, and what they think how it should apply to our lives. To decide the basic issues of survival.
Life and death. That has the power of life and death, basically.
When you really read into that statement.
In terms of what he was promoting, a secular
Now, a God,
insidious.
if you talk about nature, well, that decision, that system of law, natural law, is unbreakable. Okay? It is what it is.
Yeah, God has the absolute authority.
Already.
In terms of men
Already.
seeking to usurp that power
Already.
and exercise that power could only lead to disaster.
We're not talking about any more power to nature. Nature's got its power. It's not going to suddenly start going, you know what, I'm going to put more nature on you. And harsher with that nature. Like making the air harder to breathe. Although that can happen. But it's through our actions that causes that.
Well,
Yeah? It's not nature.
a volcano could erupt.
Yeah, things happen like that. But on the whole, it's 99.99% common sense.
Is it
Emotional intelligence,
human,
the way of the world.
caused global warming, that sort of shit? It's mostly the natural world in its goings on. The our election that could be disputed.
All weather on Earth is caused by the sun. Let's get that into our brains for a start. But men have the ability to intervene with chemtrails, geoengineering. But I've never seen a positive outcome with what man's been doing when he tampers with what is a perfectly balanced system.
Human intervention.
There's no need. What's needed is this emotional understanding, this intelligence of ages, this recognition of patterns.
Before we try and fix anything else. Yeah.
Right.
Take out the beam of your own eye before you try and pluck the...
Now we've lost ancient knowledge. And the reason we've lost ancient knowledge is because it's uncool. Just like the changing of words. Because once you change that word, anything that was previously associated with that word now has a negative emotion. And by emotions, people buy into everything, don't they? It's through emotion that people have a favourite football team. And it's through emotion that people will buy this kind of baked beans over this brand. And it's through emotion that people, live the way that they live. Their lives are lived very much in a sympathetic, and maybe the emphasis is on the pathetic side, where, like, what others think of them comes very much into their core of their being, and therefore they're not really being themselves. And some of the ways that they lash out emotionally, right, is very subversive and bordering on narcissism. Because again, in the image of the narcissist and the image of the psychopath, that's what corporations are. That's what they do to people over time. They create monsters out of people. They limit.
About two different things.
They limit the reward for emotional intelligence.
People who rely for their self-image on a perceived
set of notions,
on what they it's the
what
value
the Joneses think.
They value the opinions of others to form their own self-concept, or as having validity over their self-concept. And the other one is narcissism.
Yet at the same time comes this selfish notion, self-preservation. But is it selfish? Because to protect and preserve one's own family, coming back to the finite nature of us, can't do all things. So therefore, we can only do for our own. Those who are already in agreement with us, we would hope and pray that the ones of our own household are the ones that are most for us. However, we find in this day and age they're not. And there's a reason for this.
What does Messiah say?
Everyone has their own...
Who's my brother? Who's my mother? Who were my brethren?
Aside from that, aside from all of that, coming back to the Superman that lived
Whoever hates not is this or that, for my sake, it's not worthy of me. This, it's tricky.
But you're quoting from a man in a way that it's like he's judging you and saying, I'm better than you. That's in the same kind of way like Kim Kardashian can say, well, I've got 20 cars and I've got diamonds around my neck and you're not worthy. No, it's in that same kind of...
It's saying that God is the Father and we're all brothers and sisters if you get on board with the understanding which Messiah brings. Otherwise, you're not really my brother in the sense that you don't recognise my father as your father.
What I recognise is the way people use those statements.
It's got to be a God thing.
But in being a God thing, and going back to what your original statement was, which is, well, a one world government based on God, that'd be perfect. Well, first of all, who's deciding who's God?
God.
What is God?
God will manifest power or we won't.
But it's already been done. my friend. Nature is nature.
No,
and we're not going to have a
we're
brand
talking-
new
we're talking-
nature.
We're talking God, which decides the course of nature.
The course of cause and effect.
When God acts, we will know and
Action
understand it as God.
and
we
reaction.
could be fooled because there's going to be another to stand up and exercise great power.
There's cause and effect, there's action and reaction, there's emotional intelligence, which is the recognition of what is good for us, what is bad for us, based on the causality of things, based on what you do, why you do, character, morality, yeah, empathy. Without empathy, without objectively putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else,
No.
walking around in their shoes. It is the extension of subjectivity. There is nothing else that you can see. You only know what you know. You only know what you know. So it's always a subjective view of how the other is feeling. But the closer you are aligned to truth, the more you come into contact with being right. And that is conventional wisdom. That is emotional intelligence.
When people
You
can
connect
recognise
the correct.
themselves in the other, they're moving towards the kingdom.
Yes. So, are we talking about an absolute set of rules, i.e. the Ten Commandments, which is, in my view, emotional intelligence, okay? In my view, a set of common sense rules. You can break them rules. Yeah. But then the laws come into effect. Well, what are the laws? The laws are the causality of things. There's always an effect. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And you throw into the mix something like a human being, something as complex as a human being, which has emotions on everything, and most likely hasn't had one bit of training, like a Jedi, on how to control those emotions, how to, do the right thing. What is the right thing, to recognise it without always having your hand held. Yeah?
And it's a long process.
To be able to be the captain in charge of steering and controlling the rudder. Or has 20 people in your life got control of your rudder? And that's why so many people are pulled in these different directions and don't achieve anything, because there's no regular input.
Impulses in their own minds and heart.
People are not putting regular input into achieving their dreams, into changing the set of conditions that will give them the things that they want. All stuff on this earth has been made and invented and created, as it were, by the ingenuity of man. And it is by the set of circumstances we find ourselves in that I call the grace of God, that we've got an intelligence, that we are above and beyond most things that we perceive on this planet. Is that the true governance? Is that the true oneness that we really need? That one world, because my mind is my world.